Our guest today is the presiding judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County, Criminal Division. The March 6, 1998 Chicago Tribune said in their endorsement that year, and I quote, "Judge Biebel is considered to be one of the superstars in the court system," unquote. His commitment to public service as state's attorney, first assistant attorney general, the public defender of Cook County is second to none. One more quote from the Chicago Bar Association's Judicial Evaluation Committee. Quote, "Judge Biebel is universally respected by all who appear before him for his integrity, fine temperament, and fairness. Judge Biebel is viewed as hardworking, knowledgeable, thoughtful, and well-prepared. He issues well-reasoned, scholarly opinions and treats lawyers and litigants with respect and dignity," unquote. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the City Club of Chicago the presiding judge of the Cook County Criminal Division, Judge Paul Biebel. Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you all for coming. It's very gratifying to see all my friends here today. Thank you, Jay Jordy, for those very nice words. I'm pleased and honored to be speaking here today at the City Club Luncheon. I've been a member of the City Club for a long time, and I really look forward to coming to hear the excellent speakers who are provided by the City Club. I like to think that the function of the City Club is to present interesting persons to speak to interested people. And so my challenge today is to make my speech interesting, and I hope I will. At the same time, I hope my presentation is informative, perhaps unsettling, but ultimately thought-provoking. You know, when we speak of the judiciary of Cook County or the criminal justice system, we necessarily use large numbers. I'm a circuit court judge in Cook County, and as such, I'm part of the largest unified court system in the world. We will soon be electing 20 new associate judges, and there's a lot of people in this room who would like that job. I know they do. And when we have these 20, we will now then number more than 400 again, which makes us, as I say, the largest unified system in the world. And when I say we're part of a unified court system, I mean that as a circuit judge, I can serve in any division of the court, and indeed, I've served in many of them in my 8.5 years as a judge. Unlike some other states, we don't run as a judge of the probate court or a judge of the juvenile court, but rather we run as a judge of the circuit court. Our system is headed by an outstanding chief judge, Judge Timothy C. Evans. He's an excellent administrator, a thoughtful and unfailingly gracious person, and importantly, very supportive of his judges. In my instance, he has been singularly encouraging in our efforts at innovation and problem solving. I'm one of 15 presiding judges, and I head the criminal division. Another one of my co-presiding judges is here today. We took a break from listening to associate judge candidates. Judge Ken Wright is in the back. I'd like to recognize him. I'm the presiding judge of the criminal division, and in that regard, we speak in terms of large numbers once again. The courthouse that I supervise at 26 in California is the largest criminal courthouse in America. It has 32 jury rooms and 3 other courtrooms, one of which can be a jury room. Additionally, we have, because we've run out of space, 8 courtrooms in the suburbs. 4 are in the Bridgeview Courthouse in the 5th Suburban District in the southwestern suburbs, and 4 are in the Old Orchard Courthouse in the 2nd District in Skokie. These 8 courtrooms hear all sorts of felony cases except for murders and sex cases. And last year, the 40 felony courts that hear Chicago cases, the 32 at 26th Street and the 8 in the suburbs, disposed of about 36,000 felony cases, which is about 900 per courtroom. And when you compare our disposition rate with Los Angeles and New York, we have a much higher disposition rate per courtroom than those jurisdictions. Los Angeles had about the same amount, historically, about 36,000 dispositions. I don't quite know what it was last year, but they have over 100 judges. New York has a lot less dispositions and has a lot more than 100 judges. We have, as I say, 40. Despite the high disposition rate in Cook County, we have still experienced overcrowding in our county jail. But for those interested, I checked this morning, we're at the lowest number we have been in literally years. We've under 10,000 for the first time in memory, and today we have 9,898 people in county jail. I should also say the county jail is the largest single-site jail in the United States. Los Angeles and New York spread them out. Because of the overcrowding, I meet regularly with State's Attorney Devine, Public Defender Burnett, and their top assistants to deal with this issue, particularly the older cases that are in the system, and we are dealing with that. Additionally, Chief Judge Evans has recently created 2 new courts to hear exclusively drug cases. One used to be Branch 25 in my building, now Judge Jack Fleming has that, and one is in the 5th District, Judge Vicki Stewart has that. Those 2 courtrooms each will dispose of about 1,500 cases this year. In addition, we're looking forward to a report that is going to come out by the Trotter Commission. Professor Joseph Trotter is a professor at American University in Washington, D.C. He wrote a 1989 report of the criminal courts, and he's updating it. And one of the issues they're going to help us deal with is to better deal with these vast numbers of felony cases that come into our system. That report should be finished in a few months. I should note, as a measure of comparison, in 1993, the National Center for State Courts did a report, and they recommended that on the basis of 31,500 dispositions, we had 36 last year, we should have 65 judges. So we'll just give you an idea, that what we run under. But we're also aware of the fact that money is tight these days for all government, and we will do with what we have. We believe that despite the massive numbers of cases facing our system, the system nevertheless works well because of the skill and the hard work of excellent judges and lawyers that practice at 26th Street. Unlike most other counties in Illinois, Cook County, we often have judges who are assigned to a given division for extensive lengths of time, sometimes permanently, as it turns out. We are fortunate to have a corps of excellent judges in the criminal division. Virtually every criminal court judge has practiced criminal law as a lawyer and as a judge their entire career. As assistant state's attorneys, assistant public defenders, private practitioners, doing criminal work before they became judges. This is unlike many counties where judges are transferred every couple of years. In Lake County, for example, the chief judge changes every 2 years. And in some counties, there are judges that take criminal calls that have never seen a criminal case before. That's not the way it is in Cook County. There is no learning curve in Cook County. These judges already come as experts in criminal law. Our 3 most senior judges at 26th Street have a combined total of 94 years of service on the bench. Judge Fred Surya is the dean of our judges. He started as a judge in 1964, 41 years ago. Fred Surya travels in every day from Barrington, some 40 miles each way, and is as energetic and enthusiastic as any 25-year-old lawyer that I know. Additionally, he is an outstanding trial lawyer and is widely and affectionately known as Fair Fred. The 2 other most senior judges are also outstanding jurists. One is to my right, Judge Mike Tooman. He's been a criminal judge since 1980, 25 years on the bench. I think it's fair to say that Mike Tooman knows more criminal law than anybody in Illinois, whether he's a judge, a professor, a practitioner. Mike Tooman is simply a judge's judge. He's here today. I'd like him to stand and be recognized. I want to point out another outstanding judge at 26th Street, one of our great young judges, Judge Stuart Palmer's in the back. Please recognize him. And he's been mentioned before, but I've got to say it. Truly a judicial giant, one of the best judges that's ever served in Cook County, in the 26th Street Judge Earl Strayhorn. And although he didn't serve at 26th Street, I want to make note of the fact that my friend Justice Seymour Simon's here today. Seymour? There are many judges here today, our friends, and I'm really glad they came. I'd like them all stand to be recognized. I talked about three judges. The third most senior judge is Judge Jim Schreier, who started out as an assistant state's attorney in 1965, and he never left the building. He became a judge in 1977, 28 years ago. Jim Schreier is truly an outstanding judge, and I'm really grateful that he works with me as well as the other judges at 26th Street. The types of cases that are coming to 26th Street are changing, in part due to the aggressive and effective police work on the part of the Chicago Police Department, now ably headed by Superintendent Phil Klein. Most telling is the decreasing numbers of murders in the last 4 years. In 2001, we had 666 murders, then 654, then 599, and last year we had 448 murders, which was down 151 from the year before, or 25.2%. Further good news, through March 11th, the last numbers that I have, we're down nearly 21% this year from last year, from 72 to 57 murders. Additionally, when you compare this last year's murder total of 448 with the 1995 total of 828, you can see how profound an impact more effective policing has made. Other good news, every index or serious crime was down in 2004 in Chicago, except vehicle theft, which went up 0.3%. Until last year, Chicago led the nation in the number of murders for many years. But as I say, in 2004, our total was 448, which was much less than New York City, which always was below us. They had 571, and Los Angeles had 511. This has made an obvious impact on our criminal justice system, with substantially less serious, violent crime being brought into the system. But we still have massive numbers of cases coming into the system. Why? Well, first of all, Chicago is very aggressive in gun cases. In 2004, Chicago recovered 10,500 guns. Los Angeles, 8,450 guns. In New York, but 6,350. Those gun cases come in, they need to be prosecuted. But critically, we have large numbers of drug cases coming into the system. And now I'm going to give you some startling statistics. In an April 2002 series of articles in the Chicago Sun-Times, Steve, authored by Frank Main and Carlos Sadovi, they quoted various experts as to the extent of the illegal drug trade in Chicago. A University of Chicago economist, Stephen Levitt, estimated that the annual profit from drugs is about $500 million a year. Profit, not sales, profit. About 2/3 of the domestic product of the city of Chicago. However, a federal drug enforcement coordinator in Chicago, Tom Donahue, felt that $500 million figure was much too low, and he said that he thought the total profits from such illegal drug sales was closer to $1 billion. B as in boy, billion. That number is simply shocking when you consider that Cook County's budget for all public safety activities, the running of the jail, the running of 26th Street, the budgets of the state's attorney, the public defender, the clerk, the sheriff, approximates $1 billion. Something wrong with this picture when the annual drug profits about equal the county expenditures for law enforcement. And the county is generous with the money they put into law enforcement. Another startling figure. The illegal drug trade in Chicago is totally controlled by street gangs. There are no independent contractors out there selling drugs on the corners. The Chicago Police Department estimates the total number of street gang members in Chicago at 68,000. I had a long conversation with the gang expert for the Sheriff's Police Department yesterday. He thought that number was low. and he would estimate the total gang membership in the county of Cook is well in excess of 100,000. And of course, we export gangs to the other counties. We export gangs to Wisconsin and the surrounding states. The Chicago Police Department says there are 68 active street gangs with over 500 factions in the city of Chicago. Not only do the gangs sell and distribute drugs, but they're also involved in violent crime. Last year, about 47% of the 448 murders were gang-related. 70% of the cases that come into our system involve drugs directly or indirectly. Directly with the sale, distribution of drugs, possession of drugs. Indirectly with crimes committed to pay for drugs, committed under the influence of drugs, or as I just said, murders over drug issues. The Chicago Police Department has attacked the problem of illegal drug sales directly and aggressively, realizing that there are some 100 open-air drug markets in Chicago, on the corners, out in front of everybody, where gangs sell to thousands of customers 24 hours a day. And at least 1/3 of those customers comes in for the suburbs to buy their drugs. Last year, and Judge Tillman and Judge Palmer, and I certainly know about this because we have them come in and we issue orders, the Chicago Police Department completed 39 drug corner conspiracy initiatives, resulting in 700 alleged conspirators being indicted, $222 million in narcotics being recovered. Those cases have an obvious impact on our criminal caseloads. Despite these dire realities, there are many positive and effective programs in Cook County dealing with persons caught within the grasp of drug addiction. One such program is the state's attorney's drug school diversion program. Last year, 4,600 participants, these are all people who've been arrested for low-level drug offense first time around, went through this educational program. 80 to 85% successfully finished. And those who finished had their cases diverted. That means the case is dropped and they have a chance to have that arrest expunged. Impressively, 84% of those who finished that program have no new drug arrests for at least 3 years. And these are people who have drug problems. It's an incredible statistic. Sheriff Michael Sheehan has started an extremely effective boot camp for those convicted of non-violent felonies. This is not diversionary. These young men are stuck with felony convictions, but, as I'll explain to you, it's a very positive part of their life. There are 15 classes a year, 48 persons per class. The first 18 weeks resemble Army boot camp with vigorous physical training. After 18 weeks, there's a formal graduation ceremony, and it is truly impressive. All these young men are in great physical shape. There's no fat guys anymore. Somebody 50 pounds in 18 weeks, some people have lost. More important, these are all men from the ages of 17 to 29. And these are all men who are basically black, to a lesser extent Hispanic, to a lesser extent white. More importantly, these graduates possess a significant pride in their accomplishments. And there's great pride in the eyes of their families as they see these young men march in and receive the congratulations of us and those in the room. It's truly a moving event. More impressively, however, is the fact that the average boot camp inmate has substantially improved his reading and math skills. The average increase in reading skills in that 18 weeks is 2 to 3 grades. The average math skill increase is 1 to 2 grades. Now, I was privileged to be the commencement speaker for the 99th graduation, and they've now had about 105. The Cardinal did the 100th, Father. The class that I had started with 48 young men, 43 got through. The average reading score level went up 2.6 grades. The average math level went up 1.3 grades. In effect, these young men who are products of the Chicago public school system, not unlike the other guys they left behind, went up over 5 semesters in reading skills and nearly 3 semesters in math skills in but 1 semester. Isn't that a challenge for the schools? Lastly, the proof is in the long-term results. These young men who finish the one-year boot camp program, there's 18 weeks, as I've mentioned, with a graduation, but there's also 34 weeks of carefully supervised aftercare. They only have a 28% recidivism rate after 5 years, which is much lower than those who haven't gone through boot camp. We are fortunate to have one of the most effective specialized drug courts in America in the courtroom of Judge Larry Fox, room 504 at 26th Street. There are specialized and dedicated state's attorneys, public defenders, and adult probation officers that work under the effective, enthusiastic leadership of Judge Fox. That court has become a model for the nation. Drug courts started in Florida under Janet Reno, ironically, in Dade County in 1988, and now they're all over the country. And now I went to a convention in Washington, D.C. 2 years ago. There were 3,000 participants. But Judge Fox does about as well as anybody. And again, the proof is in the results. Those who've gone through the inpatient treatment for this program and the vigorous outpatient treatment under the diligent watch of very good, dedicated probation officers and Judge Fox, they don't get into further trouble very often. 79% have no felony convictions after 3 years. And again, that's much better than you would find if they hadn't gone through Judge Fox's program. The graduations for Judge Fox's program, it's called the RAP program, take place twice a year. And it really is like a religious revival. People get up and sing, so happy to have graduated, finished, be out of the grasp of drugs. We'll read poems, and many times you'll hear, "God brought us Judge Fox." About 3 years ago, it became obvious to several of us that many of the defendants in Judge Fox's courtroom suffer from what we call co-occurring disorders. That is, not only do they suffer from a drug addiction, but they also had mental health issues. That realization started conversations between Judge Fox and me and Pam Rodriguez from TASC. Pam, stand up, will you? You've been a formative part of this. Stand up, just don't wave. Now, TASC is a very important part of the criminal justice system because they evaluate drug offenders, among a lot of other things that they do. We decided to create a committee composed of people a lot smarter than us in a lot of areas. Psychiatrists, psychologists, social scientists, treaters, and other knowledgeable persons to talk about the creation of a mental health court, realizing that many people with mental health problems seem to want to self-medicate with the use of illegal drugs. In that regard, another startling statistic. 80% of the women offenders in Cook County Jail suffer from a co-occurring mental health and substance abuse disorder. 80%. Now, the general number that they bandy around in terms of people who have a chronic mental illness is 16 to 20%, but that's generally men. But when you get to 80% with women, and when I first heard that figure, cited by Terry McDermott, who is the executive director of the Sheriff's Department of Women's Justice Services, I asked her about it, and she said that 80% figure was due to the fact that 80% of the women in the jail system have been physically or sexually abused. Try that, 80%. And many suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, which is a debilitating psychiatric condition. When you add this to the realization that in Illinois, almost 80% of the women incarcerated are single mothers and the sole caretakers of their children, we begin to see how important it is to effectively treat the entire problem caused by co-occurring disorders. Parenthetically, I spent nearly 3 years earlier in my judicial career in the Child Protection Division of the Juvenile Court, hearing abuse and neglect cases. A very large percentage of the 1,100 active cases on my call involved kids whose mothers were on drugs and unable or unwilling to care for them because of their drug use. I should say parenthetically, too, we are faced with a lot of mentally ill people in the system. And those of us who are old enough to remember in the 60s and 70s when the mental health hospitals were closed. There was a feeling that they could treat people with outpatient services because they had better psychotropic medicines. A statistic will indicate just how broad that impact was. remember Dunning Mental Health Hospital out in West Irving Park? In the 60s, they had 5,000 inpatient beds. Today, it's Chicago Read. They got 220 beds. This was done with good intentions, but I think there are a couple things missing. One, there aren't enough treaters out there in the street to take care of this, and number two, how do you get people to take their meds? So those are the parenthetical things I'm mentioning. Because of all these realizations, the problems of co-occurring disorders, we created a mental health court which opened in April of last year, 2004, with Judge Larry Fox hearing the cases involving the females and Judge Jay Crane hearing those involving the men. It's my understanding this was the first such program in the United States to deal exclusively with low-level, non-violent felons. Most places, it's misdemeanors. But it was our strong feeling that people aren't in the system long enough as misdemeanors to be able to treat them well. There are two other courts like ours that apparently have started up since, one in the Bronx, New York, and one in West Virginia. Let me tell you the problem you have with mentally ill people as opposed to drug people. You know if somebody has a cocaine habit or a heroin habit. But if somebody's mentally ill, we have to determine, first of all, what's their diagnosis. Then we have to figure what is an appropriate medication for them. Then we have to figure out what's an appropriate dosage for them. And then when they start feeling better, they say, I'm not sick anymore, when in fact it's like having diabetes or heart problems and you have to take medication. Merely because you're feeling better doesn't mean you can go off your meds. You've got to stay on the meds for the rest of your life, and that is a learning process. The people who are involved in making the determination of who are going to come into our drug court, sometimes number 20 in number, with all sorts of different disciplines there, to find appropriate people for this course, for this court. We've had 27 probationers admitted to this pilot program. Only 2 have been resentenced and dropped out of the program due to non-compliance with program rules. The other successful programs I mentioned, like the other successful programs I mentioned earlier, the mental health court program has experienced impressive initial success. The participants in this program, the 27, spent the year prior to getting into this court program an average of 102 days apiece in county jail. The year before. In the first 9 months of this program, the average spent 6.5 days in county jail. And 60% of that time was served by 2 defendants. Obviously, this saves taxpayers money. We figure direct costs, and I think we're conservative in this, to keep somebody in a jail or a prison is $25,000 a year. This doesn't include medical, this doesn't include education, $25,000 a year. Well, if we've dropped that number down, we've kept these people out, and we can keep other people out of jail with diversionary programs. Obviously, this impacts the public purse. 85% of the people in this program have never been arrested. This is truly impressive when you consider the average participant in this program, in their history, had 33.4 arrests, average. 2.4 total convictions the year prior to coming into this program. By contrast, those screened for the program that didn't come into this mental health program had much more recent involvement with the law. 50% had new arrests since not being admitted, that being a year, 50%. We know that people who are mentally ill oftentimes are getting rearrested because they simply don't have the ability to conform unless they're on meds. Another 25% had current outstanding warrants for their arrest on the original case for which they'd been referred to the mental health court and weren't taken. We are pleased and proud of the initial success of this mental health court program, which, by the way, was done with existing resources. We didn't ask for new judges, new prosecutors, new public defenders, new probation officers, realizing that money's tight. We used existing resources. And that success has been possible because, like this program and the other programs we're dealing with, there's an immense amount of success that's realized because people are cooperating. People are pulling together, all the different agencies, knowing that these are important issues that we have to deal with. I've asked permission of Bernie Judge today, and we have those here, Jimmy. We have, if you want, this court was the subject of the front page article in the Chicago Lawyer in March of 2005. Really an excellent article. If you're interested, we'll have copies if you haven't read it already. Having described some of the impressively successful programs we've had in the criminal justice system, I want to conclude with a reality check. That reality can be experienced by attending Central Bond Court, which operates at 26th Street 365 days a year. Central Bond Court is when people come into the system where bonds are set for them. If you went in and spent a half an hour, you would find the following. An overwhelming percentage of these persons are black, male, poor, underemployed or unemployed, lacking a full high school education, and in many instances possessing a lengthy arrest and conviction record. Many will go to prison. The statistics compiled by Dean Art Lariggio of Loyola University in 2002 said that of those who come out of Cook County who go to prison, 50% will go for drug cases, and 85% of that 50% are black. And for those who have felony convictions on their record, it is extremely difficult to get back into life and obtain decent employment. We work with the North Lawndale Community Organization, which is, North Lawndale is just a mile and a half north of the criminal courthouse at 26th Street. The people who work with the population there tell us that they estimate that 70% of the males in this African American community have felony records, 70%. If you compare the females, the total adult population, 57% have felony convictions. Nationwide, it is widely reported that 1/3 of the black males in the United States between the ages of 20 and 29 are in jail, in prison, on probation, or on parole. Shocking statistic. More are involved in the criminal justice system than are involved in the educational system. The enormity of the problem is obvious, and it's a problem we have been actively studying for the last couple of years on what we call the Disproportionate Minority Confinement Committee, which is chaired by the Reverend Byron Brazier of the Apostolic Church of God at 63rd and Dorchester. We meet with them monthly. We've been doing this for a couple of years. A report will be coming out soon. Without adequate education, housing, and employment opportunities, many of the persons coming out of prison, and there's well over 100,000 coming out of prison this year throughout the country, many of these people will fail and find themselves back within the grip of the criminal justice system again, to the detriment of our society, the neighborhoods themselves, and in my view, most importantly, the kids that they're responsible for. The challenge, it seems to me, is for city, county, state, and federal legislators to adequately address these issues so that these persons can become productive members of society. And as concerned citizens and voters, the challenge is also ours. Thank you for coming today. It's been my privilege to speak to you about these criminal justice issues. Thanks for your kind attention.
If you have a question, we adjourn at 1:30 the latest. Go right ahead, just state your name.
My name is Michael Radzalowski. I'm an attorney, I'm a member of the City Club, and I commend you for the work that you've done in moving the prison system forward and becoming proactive. I think there's still one dark corner that needs to be dealt with, and that's what can happen as far as violence with people who are incarcerated in Cook County Jail. I mean, I've had experience for people who didn't pay support. In one case, a man refused to take a paternity test, gets put in prison, and I think somewhat intentionally got put in a cell where he got beaten up by the other inmates and almost died a couple of days later. When he was home, luckily his mother had come to see him and got him to the hospital because he had a ruptured spleen. But there are many instances where people suffer violence in the jails, and I don't know what if anything, you think can be done about it.
I don't know, but I will tell you this, that at the request of President Strozer and Chief Judge Evans, I extended the March 2003 grand jury under the guidance of the investigator in that case, retired Judge Thomas Hett, who looked into those issues and issued a 150-page report about situations in the jail.
Any other questions? Step right up to the mic. State your name, rank.
Tom Leahy, attorney. Judge, since your total immersion in the criminal justice system and your involvement with the drug culture in particular, I'm just wondering whether or not any of your attitudes have changed about the legalization or the decriminalization of drugs since before you became chief judge. I know you were in the civil area, and now you're so involved in it, and I'm just wondering whether or not any of your attitudes have changed.
The legalization issue is one that's a public policy issue that's beyond any judge. And we have to take the law as we find it. And if the law is constitutional, we've got to enforce it. But I think that what you've heard today is a lot of things that we're trying to do in terms of diverting people from the system or making sure that they can come out of the system in better position than they would have otherwise. Commissioner.
Good afternoon, Judge Biebel.
Yes, sir.
Tony Pareca, County Commissioner. I want to first of all thank you for your wonderful presentation, but as you know, we have just finished a struggle over a $3 billion budget, and as you correctly pointed out, $1 billion of that goes for public safety. Among the items that we talked about during the Finance Committee hearing is the reasons and the solutions for the overcrowding in county jail. The county system, through our entire Cook County system of corrections, processes about 105, 110,000 detainees a year. Sheriff Sheehan has indicated that a couple of reasons that are most the cause of the overpopulation that we experience, which is, as you know, something that Judge Maravich has been monitoring strictly in his Duran versus Sheehan oversight case, is because of, number one, the fact that the judges are not disposing cases as quickly as they should. We had something like 1,200 cases that have been in the system between a year and 5 years. Maybe 100 or 75 of them have been in there for 5 years, where people have been awaiting trial without being released on bond for obvious reasons. The second biggest problem for overcrowding that we have is the issue of drug-related offenses. And electronic monitoring, which has been expanded lately, needs to be looked at as a further diversion mechanism, as well as some of the other ones that you have mentioned. How can we, under your leadership, make sure that the cases don't languish in the system for up to 5 years awaiting trial? And we have more than a few, as you know. And how can we make sure that these diversion mechanisms, particularly in drug-related cases where you have non-violent offenders, can be gotten out of the system so we can reduce the number below 9,800 detainees, something to a level where you can actually engage in rehabilitation rather than just incarceration and storage of detainees. Thank you.
First of all, we're over 183 today, which when we've been over 12 or 1,400, 183 is very good. With regard to the older cases, we did an inventory. We had 220 cases that were over 3.5 years old. I meet monthly with the state's attorney, his first assistant, the public defender, and his chief assistant. He's here today, Xavier Velasco. And we're going over each case by case. And we're dealing with those. And I think that you'll find within a year most of those cases will be gone. I want to repeat once again that we had 900 cases per courtroom disposed of last year. In California, it's about 300 and something. In New York, it's about 200 and something. We're very busy. And we started new drug courts in that regard. We're working on that. We're going to have the Trotter Commission report, which is going to come out, which will help us in that regard. With regard to EM, electronic monitoring, I think electronic monitoring should be greater used. That's a question of resources. I understand there may be 500 more electronic bracelets that might be available. That certainly would be helpful. We have a thing called the Cook County Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, which meets often under the heading of the leadership of retired appellate justice Bill Quinlan. And again, everybody in the system gets together to collectively see if there are better ways that we can deal with this. We're trying real hard, Commissioner, and I expect you're going to see some results that are coming up in the future.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a question, I have a comment. I'd like to commend you on your report this morning. The things that you've talked about in the African American community we've known for years. And treatment providers like the work that TASC is doing and Gateway and the Human Resources Development Institute. I'm Dr. Tara Thomas, President and CEO of Human Resources Development Institute. one thing that I'm glad that you brought out, which is what I see as a core factor in terms of drug abuse, and in my 30 years of dealing with people who are drug addicted, I've not met one single female who had not been sexually abused as an infant, as a child. And the statistics are similar for men as well. The other issue that we need to look at in terms of people who are incarcerated and who have drug addiction are also people who have learning disabilities that have never either been treated properly or have never been properly diagnosed. And most of the time, by the time a kid gets to 3rd or 4th grade, their needs are not being met educationally, so they end up becoming labeled by 4th grade as behavioral problem, and then they're often running down the wrong trail. So thank you again for your presentation.
Thank you. In that regard, let me simply say this. Thank you. Several of my friends are here today that have served with me or after me in the Child Protection Division of the Juvenile Court. Many of the cases that I had and they have on their active calendars involve mothers who've had crack babies. What does it take to have a crack baby? Mother has to take within 3 days of that baby's birth. As a result, a lot of these kids come through, they're hyperactive, they've got low attention spans and things like this. And so there's a lot of drug use, there's a lot of alcohol use that creates problems for children who were born in the utero either because mom's on drugs or alcohol, that create problems in the future too. So this is another issue that we've been dealing with. My strong opinion about what goes on in the adult system is fashioned to a great extent by what I learned from my 3 years of doing abuse and neglect cases. It's a system that just isn't isolated. It starts when these kids are little. You've got to protect them and hopefully get them into situations where they've got affirming people in their lives so they have a sense that they have value and perhaps won't fall into the control of gangs or get involved in criminal activity otherwise. Hi, Pat.
Hi, Judge. Good to see you.
Nice to see you, too.
Pat Giordano, attorney, member of the City Club. I think you're doing a phenomenal job and attacking these problems comprehensively. Just one issue that you didn't address that seems to be important, and that is the issue of employment opportunities for these people.
I mentioned it
You may have
because I mentioned it's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, I just wondered what is going on. Obviously it's not just your responsibility, but as a society, how do we help address that issue with the loss of manufacturing jobs that we've had in the city and so forth, and try to get, obviously there's economic incentive for these people to be into the drug trade. What can we do as a society to improve the job opportunities as these people come out?
You have to back up and you have to improve the educational opportunities also for them because they have to be educated before they can really realistically get these jobs. We have talked to employers who have taken people who have felony convictions and they find that, particularly if they're on parole or probation, they have to take urine drops, so they have to stay clean. Their biggest problem is employees that aren't in the criminal justice system that aren't clean, as they tell me. So, I mean, it takes an educational thing, and there are people in the communities, they're trying very hard to get job placements for people coming out of jail.
Anything else? Rob, how about a big last round of applause?